Publishers like Llewellyn and Hay House, where while they're marketing to a really broad audience in theory, they are ultimately afraid of intimidating, frightening, or in any way deterring white people. If they make these goddesses more accessible by softening them in some way, it makes them easier for white women to be with. We've all been conditioned by mass media and the marketing machine to believe that we need to look a certain way, that one particular body type is acceptable and all others are lacking. Sadly, it's often the case that women, and white women in particular, who are just entering the path of addressing their suffering and their desire for spiritual growth, are somehow unable or unwilling to view images that don't offer them something they believe they need to aspire to. See also exercise videos, exercise and fitness teachers, fitness gurus, popular yoga teachers. I think you get the point. If they don't have a body that matches the ideal, how will people be motivated to actually buy or do what's being sold to them? Help, right? So a goddess has to be superhuman, better than human, something to aspire to. So how do we physically embody that? We make her look like the current physical ideal, which, as Havana from Sparkle Divine Tarot points out, is filtered through porn ideals. And I've got a link to her video in the comments as well. Her video and Queen Ossette's video are what really got me thinking. What is that? What's going on? Why are we behaving like this? And the publisher's jobs, as they've been defined through capitalistic society, is to sell decks at any cost. And most of the people doing the buying of those decks, I would venture to say, are not going, the vast majority I'm talking about, not everyone, are not going to be as far along on their path of realization as the folks who are out here making videos, right? We're looking at people who are just entering their path. I know what kind of decks I was buying when I was new to that path. And I needed angels, and I needed, some idea of divine perfection as, defined by the culture and society. Because I really still believed on some level that I had to conform. And I don't think that on the publisher's part that this is a matter of intentionally doing something that's hurtful. I think it's a combination of ignorance and a lack of awareness of one's own drives and intentions. Because asking actual women of color like Havana and Queen Ossette would probably make the person asking feel uncomfortable or afraid of saying or doing something offensive, which might mean that they're then corrected for it, right? And remember what I was saying before, a long time ago at the beginning of this video. That moment is terrifying for white people. The correction, right? It could be something simple, right? Just a blush-worthy, immediate one that takes place in a meeting or an email, and which triggers somehow, a really strong defensive reaction in the ego of the white person, who then probably very unconsciously begins to bolster their ego through blame, pride, judgment, and passive aggression. That's how it works. That's just the low threat, everyday kind of scenario. And it's really a best case scenario for this kind of situation. Now, another possibility, this would be the worst one, of asking a high status woman of color, right? And let's say that in this case, I'll use Queen Ossette because she's amazing. The white person says or does something, offensive, and it somehow then between the two of them, escalates to a very large correction that becomes something public, like a YouTube video or an Instagram post or whatever that's visible. Such an interaction is threatening, and it's scary for a white person who then, stands to lose their job for offending a woman of color who holds status in the target market at worst. And at best, their professional reputation just takes a really serious hit. I've worked in a lot of different places, and I've watched these dynamics unfold in a lot of different circumstances, so to speak. If no one in the community is actually asked directly, then the deck, so nobody in the tarot community is directly asked about, hey, what about, we're creating a goddess oracle deck. We want to talk to you, Queen Osset, about Oya, because we're worried about getting it right. If nobody engages that, they don't take the risk of failing, right, of having their white fragility tested and found extra fragile, for lack of a better way to put it, then there's nothing at stake, right? So if no one in the community asks directly, and then the deck in question is called out by later, by powerful women of color, who are visible and part of that target market, well, then nobody in the publishing company is directly at fault. It can be passed off, at that point as just like poor judgment. Then they can have all these meetings in the office about diversity, right? Which white people love to do. And they can talk about inclusion and what that means to the company, and do some trainings so that everyone can say that they've done what's been needed to address the problem on paper. There's usually writing new policies and so forth that goes along with that, and then it blows over. And it doesn't come up again until it comes up again. It's a cycle. In other words, it's a cycle. And all of this is being dictated to by money and numbers and sales, right? So if enough of the target audience is satisfied with the deck, which ultimately comes down to the number of sales, very little, if anything, changes. It doesn't have to. That is what forms this kind of capitalistic Ouroboros that is constantly eating its own tail and never opening up and widening out into a larger world, satisfying its own hunger. So what can we do? How do we start to bring real, actual change to this situation? I've been contemplating this a lot. There's been a lot of controversy, obviously, in the online community over the Dark Goddess deck by Llewellyn, over Colette Baron Reid's Goddess deck, and her situation with Anjali Shakti, which is another video, actually. I find that heartbreaking. But that said, what would it take? Right. I think that it would take the creation of an indie goddess oracle deck by a woman of color, or through the collaboration of women of color, both in terms of contribution, artwork, writing, all of it, within the tarot and oracle community. And I think it probably requires a new voice, or new voices. And I think that once something like that is created, it would have all of the support through, purchase, public endorsement, the whole overall community through the entire process, which would also, of course, include visible white leadership. And then once the deck is successful on that level, it could then be, offered to a publisher. The vision and image of some of these more challenging and lesser known goddesses, which I believe really needs to happen. It needs a place. And I feel like it's needed, as much for people of color as it is really for someone like me, because I'm ignorant of it. I don't know who a lot of I don't even know who a lot of the goddesses are in the goddess decks, in all honesty. It's just never really been my area. But I'm really curious. I really actually want to know. But I think that's what it would take. I think it would really require those who are actively working with and have experience of these goddesses on the level at which they were intended, through their own culture, rites, beliefs, and practices, to create those decks, release them as indie decks into the larger, greater tarot community, where I know they will be supported. They just will. And I know that because white people in our community love the Dust to Onyx tarot. And I feel strongly that it would have the full support of this community. And ultimately, that is what needs to be demonstrated. It needs to be demonstrated to publishers that not all, that they're underestimating their target market audience. When really influential white leadership comes on and shows a deck like that and endorses it and loves it and learns from it and uses it, that, we can't know how much that is going to ripple out and change and begin to shift things. I mean, I really feel very strongly about that. And I also feel that the groundwork has been laid to a large extent for that to work. I know I said initially, like, I feel like, the creators of such a deck would then want to or need to negotiate, or go to a larger publisher like Llewellyn, US Games, whatever. Not sure they would. But it wouldn't hurt if that was a possibility. I know that Courtney doesn't want her deck picked up by a big publisher, and I get why. She has good reasons why. And I tend to agree with her a lot on the points that she makes where art is concerned and the ways in which art is undervalued, especially in this market. So, again, another video for another time where that's concerned. But I feel strongly that it's possible. That this is not only possible, but I think things are primed for it, right? We had these 2 Goddess Oracle decks that really blew up and exposed a lot of things within the community, and raised some big questions that needed to be asked. And we've also seen it demonstrated that, the African diaspora in general is really poorly represented by itself, and really needs to be represented by itself. It also needs to be included alongside other cultures, other belief systems, and other pantheons with full representation, in the same way that, say, the Greek or Norse goddesses are represented. So ideally, you'd open a deck, say, and find, let's say, a quarter of them are from a European background, a quarter of them come from an African diaspora, a quarter of them come from an Asian diaspora, and maybe then a quarter of them come from Native North and South American diaspora, right? Let's just say that that's the case. That potentially could be a really powerful deck. But I think more than that, we've had enough of the European ones. And what I'd really love to see, I would love to see more of the African diaspora. I'm familiar with, Oshun. I'm familiar with Oya. A few others that I won't throw out there in the event that I'm actually dishonoring them through mispronouncing names. But, really limited. The knowledge is really limited, and I would personally love to be better educated, and I would really love to have actual leadership within the African American community to help me build that understanding, or to help educate all of us, because we don't know. And even though the publishers are not willing to ask, and they're not willing to open up that dialogue, well, I'm a woman with nothing to lose. I don't have much to lose. I really don't. So I'm really happy to be the one to come out and say, like, hey, let's talk about this, or let's consider this. So now it's your turn. If you're here and you're watching this, and it may be that I showed up on your channel and put the link in the comments section of a video that you made. If I did that, it's because I'm interested in dialoguing with you, and I'm really curious about your perspective or your viewpoint. I really want to hear from people, and I'm gonna get started with a social media presence, which I've really not done because I don't like it very much. But I actually think I would really enjoy social media more with this community than I do with people I actually have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Those are my thoughts. So let me know what your thoughts are, and I look forward to opening this dialogue a little further. All right. Thanks, everyone.